Ongoing changes in grammar makes for an interesting area of research in world Englishes. In this module, we'll take a look at how changes or what changes are taking place in subject-verb agreement in different varieties of English. The general rule of subject-verb agreement says that the subject agrees with the verb in number and person, which means that a singular subject should take a singular verb and a plural subject should take a plural verb. This is the simple general rule of subject-verb agreement. However, there are many exceptions to this rule which are being practiced these days. One of these exceptions is what we call proximity agreement. According to this proximity agreement rule, a verb agrees with the nearest noun rather than the real subject of the sentence, which is comparatively distant from the verb. So the verb agrees with the noun which is closest to the verb in terms of distance rather than with the actual subject of the sentence, which may be slightly farther than the noun that it agrees with. Let's take a look at some examples. A majority of the voters support the amendment. Now, the real subject of this sentence is a majority. But because the voters is closer to the verb support, the verb agrees with the plural noun, the voters, rather than a majority, which is the real subject of the sentence. Similarly, the next sentence, a flock of goats were seen grazing in the plains. The real subject of the sentence is a flock. But because a flock is farther than the verb were, so were is closer to goats. The noun goats is closer to the verb were seen. The verb agrees with the noun goats rather than a flock, which is the real subject of the sentence. So in this way, according to proximity agreement, the verb agrees with the noun which is closer to it in distance and rather than the actual subject of the sentence. Then there's another exception which is caused by the compounding of nouns which takes place as a result of the use of the conjunction and. So when the conjunction and is used between different singular nouns, two or more singular nouns, the noun is compounded, which means that the noun then acts as, or the noun phrase then acts as a plural subject. For example, Heather and Taha are coming to the party tonight. Because of the use of the conjunction and, Heather and Taha have now been compounded and they take the verb are. Again, we make exceptions in the use of this rule as well. For example, the next sentence, leftover macaroni and cheese is in the refrigerator. Because both these nouns are uncountable, the speakers of English often overlook the fact that they have been compounded by the use of the conjunction and continue treating them as uncountable nouns and use a singular verb with them, as in the given example. Considering all these changes, a research study was conducted in 1993 by Taylor, which examined a small data set of 52 examples, and these examples came from published sources, and the idea was to study the subject-verb agreement in different varieties of English. This data of these 52 examples, they came from well-known scholars, and these scholars were also published writers. So the data came from well-known scholars published by reputable, famous, well-known publishers in both Britain and the USA. So this data comprised the use of language not by ordinary people but by highly educated people. And because this data was collected from published sources, the implication is that this data, the text from which this data was taken, they must have been reviewed and modified and edited many a time. Some of the examples from this research study show that even accomplished writers from native English-speaking countries also make these exceptions. Let's take a look at this first sentence. My own recollection of school visits amply bear out these differences. Now, the real subject of the sentence is my own recollection, which is a singular noun. However, it agrees with the noun visits, which is closer to the verb bear out. So even highly educated native speakers make this exception. They also sort of do not follow this rule strictly. Similarly, prices of equipment have risen dramatically since 1974. Government subsidies and parental power has not, on the whole, kept pace with it. Now, here, parental power, which is a singular noun, has been used for the agreement purpose. So the verb has agrees with the noun which is closer to it rather than government subsidies, which is the real subject of the sentence. Similarly, another example from the same study, Kleiman's research suggests that personality factors such as anxiety, confidence, and willingness to take risks provides information on which students are likely to avoid various structures. Again, if you notice, the writer has completely overlooked the fact that it is a list of nouns and which have been, all these nouns have been compounded by the use of the word conjunction. The verb only agrees with the last word, which the last noun phrase, which is willingness to take risks. So willingness is used for the agreement, and so the verb provides agrees with a willingness to take risks. These examples from native English speakers' published work suggest that there's a lack of concern. There is this attitude of carelessness towards the observing of subject-verb agreement rule by native English speakers. And like I keep saying, it's not just native English speakers, it is educated, published writers, etc. that we are talking about. So even these highly educated people are a little uncertain about the traditional grammar rules of subject-verb agreement, and even they break away from the rule of subject-verb agreement. Now, this research finding, this lack of concern by the native speakers for different grammatical rules, it raises lots of questions, especially in the context of world Englishes, and questions for the users of English in the outer and expanding circle countries. So one question is, if mature native speakers are so uncertain about Concord, what should our attitude, the users of English from the outer and expanding circle countries, what should our attitude towards the use of this rule be? And how should we treat our own students or the learners of English in our context? How should we treat them? Should we consider, when they make sentences like this, should we consider them as mistakes, or should we accept them and let go of these as normal usage? And then what do we teach? Should we teach these rules or should we not teach these rules? Should we teach these rules along with the exceptions? And should we start teaching this use of subject-verb agreement, the use which also keeps making changes and the rule where the native English speakers keep altering the rule. Should we accept this change? Should we consider it as an exception and start teaching it? And then where should we turn for the standard usage? We need to find out whether these are now acceptable practices in inner circle countries, or are they still considered incorrect? And if they are incorrect and the native speakers are making this mistake, where should we go when it comes to finding the correct usage, the standard usage of English? So all these questions can be answered if more and more research is conducted in this area of changes in the field of grammar. The field of world Englishes can be informed and enriched by more research in this area.